Welcome to the third and final video on how to learn songs by ear on piano. So in part one, we talked about diatonic chords in major and minor keys. Diatonic meaning that all the chords we were working with had to be within that given key signature. In part two, we talked about common chord progressions, and I had a lot of fun going through some popular songs that use these progressions. And then part three, this video now, we'll be getting kind of into the meat and potatoes of learning songs by ear and some of the things that will be really helpful now that you have a music theory background. These 5 points are my main tips for today's video, so I will read them now, but then I'm going to go through each one in order in more detail, and that will make up the end of part 3. So my first point is listen from the bottom up, meaning listen from the bass up to the middle voices, up to the highest voices, but always prioritize the bass. Number 2, find the key signature, find the key center. What is the tonic or the root note? All those terms mean the same thing. What is the key? Number 3, experiment with diatonic chords, meaning once you find the key, experiment with chords within that key signature. Number 4, if you're finding a chord that doesn't seem to match anything in your key signature, try experimenting with chords from closely related keys. And number 5, if all else fails, try to identify every chord tone you can hear. My first tip for you is to listen from the bottom first and then to the top, then to the higher pitched instruments. So always listen to the bass first. If your band or music ensemble has a bass in it, listen to that first, then listen to the upper voices. If there is not a bass player, then listen to the lowest sounds you can decipher, whether that's a piano or the lower strings of the guitar. That will give you a hint into what the chords are, because a lot of times in pop music, I would say about 80% of the time, the bass is going to be playing the root of your chord. And we'll get into exceptions of that in a little bit. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play a backing track, and I'm going to try to sing with the bass part. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I hear do, 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 do. I do, do. Okay, so what I heard was do, do, do. So let me try to find that. Oh, I actually think I got it. So, okay, so I do, and then do, and then do. Okay, so that's my pattern. I have B, E, and A. And now my next challenge is I need to build chords from those. What was the guitar player doing? So let's assume that the bass player was playing the root of the chords. So let's assume that B was either a B minor or a B major chord. Let's try B major. Okay, so I'll try that with the backing track and let's see how that sounds. 3, 4. Oh, yep, and right away I could tell that wasn't right because I heard this clash. Okay, so that must mean it's not a B major chord, it's a B minor chord. All right, and then let's assume that the E chord, let's try E major. Okay, that sounded right. You might have to experiment, but I could tell that was right. And then an A. Yeah, I don't think it was A minor, I think it was A major. So let's try that. Let's try B minor, E major, and then A major. Go 1, 2, B minor first. Yeah. There we go. So that was that chord progression. It was B minor, E, A. I do want to make you aware that there are times when the bass player might not be playing the root. And so here's a very common example of that. Let's play this progression once and watch my left hand here. Okay, so in that I did F, E, D, C. Now every single one of those bass notes was playing the root except the second one. And what was happening there, we had an F major chord, and then we went down to E in the bass. But this chord in my right hand, that's actually a C major triad, okay? So sometimes that happens where the bass is playing an inversion of the chord. It was playing the third. And you see that actually works very well. So that's just one example of a time where the bass might not be playing the root. My next tip for trying to learn songs by ear is try to figure out as soon as possible what the key of the song is, because the key of the song is going to give you good predictive power on what kind of chords are in the song. For example, if I was in the key of F, I could obviously I could say there are going to be F major chords in the song, but I also could probably have a good guess that B flat and C will be somewhere in the song, because having a 4 chord and or a 5 chord, that's very common in pop chord progressions. If you're having trouble finding what key the song you're trying to learn by ear is in, then I have 2 suggestions to offer you. Number 1 is to skip to the end and see what is the final note or the final chord. Usually that's going to be a good indication. So if I have a song and it ends like this, well, my final chord there was F, so it was probably in the key of F if the song didn't change key somewhere in the middle, which is unlikely in a pop song. Another thing you can do, and this is useful if you're in like a jam band setting where you kind of have to figure out what key you're in, like in the middle of the song, you can't wait till the end, is you can just take a guess and try playing that scale and see if it works in the song. So for instance, if I have a song and I think it's in B minor, then I can play my B minor scale. And I can try playing that over the song and see if it works. So I'm going to play a backing track and I'm going to play a B minor scale over it and see if it sounds good. So there was one note in that scale that didn't sound quite right to me. It sounded like this G needed to be a G sharp. Okay, so now let's try doing that. Let's do an A major scale where we have a G sharp. Let's try playing that over my song and see if it sounds better. That sounds better to me. Our next tip is, once you find the key of the song, try to experiment with chords that are diatonic to that key. So for instance, if I am in the key of, let's do an easy one. Let's do the key of G. Okay, what chords are diatonic in G? So we'd have G. Our next up would be A minor. Then we have a B minor chord. Remember, in G, we have an F sharp, so that's why we have a B minor chord there. Then we have a C, a D, an E minor, an F sharp diminished, and then we're back up to G. Now, it's kind of rare that you would see that F sharp diminished chord in a pop song. It just doesn't happen a lot. It's more common in jazz, but you do see it from time to time. But I would say the ones that we could expect if we're in the key of G, definitely G, probably C, and almost certainly a D chord. Okay, so now let's take that knowledge. I'm going to play a backing track, and we're going to kind of take steps 1 and step 3, kind of hand in hand. We're going to try to figure out what the key is, but then we're going to use the bass notes we know to try and guess what the chords are based on the diatonic chords in our key. So here's our backing track. Okay, so that bass line I heard was do, do. Okay, so we do, do, and then I need to listen to it again. Do, do, do. Okay, so I can tell that we're in the key of C because after we went through that progression of those 4 chords, we came back to a C. And that was also our starting chord, which is a good indication of what key we're in. Okay, so what are our diatonic chords in C? Well, our bass line, we had a C, so that was probably a C chord. Then we went to an A. Now that could be A major or A minor, but A minor is diatonic, it's in the key, right? Because we have C instead of a C sharp. Okay, so we can probably assume it's C, A minor, then we went down to an F, so let's try an F major chord. Okay, and then our last one was a G. All right, let's see if that works with the backing track. Okay. And there we go, our diatonic chords worked well. So that was a C, A minor, F, G, or a 1-6-4-5 progression. So what happens if you have a song and you know what key it's in, and you know what your diatonic chords are, but there's just 1 or 2 chords that don't seem to match with any of your possible diatonic chords? And I have an example song of that. So this is called Kiss on My List by Daryl Hall and John Oates. So I'm going to play the bass line along with this backing track. Okay, so in that bass line that you just heard, all those notes made sense in the key of C minor except for one. So we had C minor to F minor, A flat, B flat, and then this last chord, the bass note was C, but a C minor chord, it just doesn't seem to work there. See if you can hear that. I'll rewind just a little bit here. It's actually a C major chord there. So it goes A flat, B flat, to a C chord. Okay, so this is what I mean about if you have a chord that you can't identify and it doesn't match with any chords in the key, you need to experiment with chords from closely related keys. So if you're in C minor, try experimenting with chords that are diatonic to C major. Likewise, let's say that you're in the key of F major and there's a chord that doesn't work there. Well, then try experimenting with chords from the key of F minor. My last tip for you, if you've tried everything you can, you've experimented with diatonic chords, you've experimented with chords outside of the key signature, and you just can't seem to find something that matches, just try to identify every chord tone you can hear, even if it's only 1 or 2 of them, and try to make it work. Because sometimes you're dealing with these jazzy chords that might have like 5 or 6 notes, and you will still get the same kind of effect if you can only decipher 2 of them, as long as they're correct notes. So I'm going to play, this is Cantaloupe Island by Herbie Hancock. It's a jazz tune. And I'm going to try to, I do know what this chord is, but let's just pretend I didn't, and I needed to pick out note by note what is in that chord. Okay, so I'm going to listen from the bottom first. I hear do, 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 do. Okay, what note is that? Do, do. Okay, so let's continue with that. Let's listen to some of the upper tones now. I hear a guitar playing a very prominent A. I know I said to listen from the bottom up, but if one of them reaches out to you, you can definitely try to figure that out too. Okay, so that was pretty noticeable. What are the other tones? I hear do, do. You hear that? Okay. And then I hear this. See if you can hear that F. One more time. Okay, so that's our chord. Okay, that's actually something called a seventh chord. It's a D minor 7 chord, D, F, A, C. Okay, so that's kind of my last tip for you. I mean, just trust your ears because you're probably right if you hear something, even if it doesn't, music theory-wise sound intuitive to you. So I hope you enjoyed this series, and I hope that I gave you at least a couple helpful tips for learning songs by ear.